So just to start us off, just a quick moment to share some empathy here, because I think we're all in crazy situations, but just a heads up, we are in Ontario in a lockdown. My house is torn apart. We have renovators, my kids home from school. I've done my best to try to make sure we don't have any interruptions or background noise, but apologies if that does happen. So empathy out to anyone else in similar situations. Okay, so to officially start. So my name is Gail, and I am a senior technical learning designer in the R&D programs group at Shopify. Actually, prior to Shopify, I spent a number of years in academia, both as a computer science grad student as well as a faculty instructor. Even though I started at Shopify mid-2015 as a developer, my passion for learning gave me an opportunity to lead the design and launch of what is now called DevDegree. Not something I'm talking about today, but something that this group might be interested in if you want to look it up later. Since then, I have to say learning as a function has really evolved and matured at Shopify. And now I focus specifically on designing learning experiences for shop folk in research and development. In shop folk, we're a great techie kind of geeky bunch. Shop folk are often interested in learning deep technical skills that take a lot of time and effort to master. That goes for folks who are in technical disciplines like engineering, as well as folks who are interested in learning these skills from the beginning. So this raises the question, how do we support learning at scale of these kind of deep technical skills so the largest number of learners can master the skills using the smallest number of human resources to get there? But before I share my solution, I want to put it to all of you, and we're a little bit of a small group, but I think this will still work. I would like us to take a moment to share some thoughts on what we think would be useful ways to address this problem. So I've set up a little poll everywhere question here. If you go to this URL, pollev.com/Gail Carmichael, I don't know if you need the capitals. You shouldn't have to, but I found I had to, when I tested it, try a couple times. So try it with the capitals just in case. And just put in any and all ideas you have in there. So any partial thoughts you have, any like keywords, what can we do to support deep technical learning at scale in industry? And as you're entering stuff, I want to encourage you to upvote other ideas as well. So I'm going to give you a few moments to start, and then I'm going to change what I'm sharing on my screen so we can see our responses. Okay, so now I'm sharing our results so far. So I'm seeing a few things come in. Awesome. So again, if you see an idea that you didn't write that you agree with, please go ahead and upvote it. This would be a lot more meaningful if we had like 100 people, I guess. We could have all kinds of ideas coming in. I'll give you all just a moment to add maybe 1 or 2 more ideas. You didn't think you're going to feel like you're in a classroom, did you? Came to a conference. So just another moment or 2. If you have not added an idea, I encourage you to try adding anything at all that comes to mind. So while you're kind of entering the last couple of ideas that you have, let's have a look what we have so far. So the top 2 with a grand total of 1 upvote are create learning communities to support sharing and engagement with clients and users. So those are both interesting ones. We also have a few things here: leverage technology to crowdsource learning, scenario-based learning, talking to them in research maybe are similar. If anybody wants to speak to the research one and the talking to them, I'm interested in the lens that you had for those. So if you're willing to put it into the chat box or even come on camera to share what you were thinking behind that, that would be really cool. Where are you, chat? There you are. Hooray. For me, it is building the relationships through talking and research. Aha, got it. So building relationships with learners, I assume you mean, Diane. Very cool. Okay. Yeah, awesome. Cool. All right. I'm going to switch my share again. Thank you for playing along with me, even though we have a small number of folks and not necessarily a lot of responses to play with there, but I can't help but do something interactive in my talks, so appreciate you playing along. So I'm going to share back to my slides. There we go. Make sure my Zoom is handy with my chat. Okay, we're all set. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we did to try to address this problem. And I think you'll see some of what you have shared in our little poll there, but also maybe some things that are a little bit different, just because it might be a different kind of domain that we're learning than what you were thinking of. I'll tell you first about our very first experiment in trying to do this. So we had a course, it was called Intro to Ruby for Shop Folk. I was repurposing a course that I had actually used for dev degrees. So it was originally for undergrad students who had baseline programming skills and who wanted to learn Ruby, which is one of the primary languages that we use at Shopify for development. And so we took that course and we said, okay, what if we made it available to shop folk who are interested in learning Ruby, but maybe like needed a little structure, maybe some deadlines, maybe some feedback, that kind of thing. So we did this over a course of 8 weeks. We set up a group of mentors. We had some assignments. First half of assignments we just did with peer instruction. The other half we did was a project with different tasks, and we intended to have feedback from mentors throughout the project. Yeah, so basically we had 53 people who were interested in getting started. Some of them realized pretty quickly that they didn't have the baseline programming experience they needed. So actually we kind of got them to defer to the next experiment that I'll tell you about in a second. But 12 people got halfway through the course. So they got through the first 4 weeks, got to the project and didn't finish the project. Some of them did get partway through the project and then kind of dropped off partway, and 2 finished. So basically in terms of people finishing the course entirely, we had only 2 get through the whole thing. We did find that shop folk were really hungry to learn more, to more deeply learn technical skills with their peers. But yeah, we didn't get a huge number of people through the course. And so we wanted to try to see if we could do better. So we were very ambitious. And for our second experiment, we set out with an even bigger goal. We wanted to bring a group of shop folk who had never programmed before through an entire university level CS1 course. So the course is designed to be accessible to complete beginners, and it teaches programming fundamentals as well as computational thinking skills. In fact, this is a course that I used to teach at Carleton University that I had adapted for use in Shopify for dev degree again. And then we are no longer using it as part of dev degree. So I wanted to make it accessible to folks at Shopify who wanted to learn programming. So quite ambitious. That's an even longer course than this little Ruby course. How would we do it? So based on what we learned from our first experiment and just generally what we know about learning, these are the things we needed to hit on in order to succeed. So for the learners, we wanted to make sure they got meaningful feedback. In this particular course, that meant from humans and humans with subject matter expertise. You can do a lot of really good stuff in a CS1 level course with automated feedback, but the course wasn't designed for that. So we weren't able to take advantage of that anyway. We wanted to make sure people felt a sense of accountability because, you kind of, even if you really want to do this, if nobody's watching because it's on top of your day job, you really, you need to feel like somebody cares, somebody's watching. And similarly, you need to have flexibility to work around that day job because this is extra. You might be given, professional development time, and at Shopify, we do call ourselves a learning organization. So this is something that's encouraged, but still, you have the pressure to ship all the time. So you have to have that flexibility. We know we want a consistent mentorship because in our previous experiment, although we had a pool of mentors, they weren't assigned to specific learners. And that's something that they really wanted to have. They wanted to be able to work with someone through their whole journey and really have that consistency, and they felt they could do a better job that way. And we wanted to have a sense of community for learners as well. That did come up in our poll just now, I remember. For mentors, again, specific learners to help, as we just mentioned. And it was really important to set reasonable and clear expectations. The Ruby course experience, although I did try to set really good expectations, I learned where I fell short. As I get a little better each time, I still fall short each time. And so I really wanted to make sure this time that I spelled out exactly what was involved and make very clear expectations, but also, require not so much time for mentors that, they also had to compete with their day-to-day jobs and responsibilities. And finally, for program managers, we needed scalability in terms of the resources and operational requirements. So it has to be not too hard to run the thing. And we wanted it so that you can have visibility into learners' progress and what outcomes we're getting. I find this is something that we often fall short of, I'll say, in industry, where we don't necessarily know whether our learners are learning with our programs. sometimes we kind of stop at, do they like it? So it's nice to be able to get a little deeper into evaluation. So our solution is what we're calling the guild-based delivery model. So let me walk through how it works. And a few key points are up here on the slide, but not necessarily all. So our design was inspired by a lot of research on game-like learning from scholars like James Paul Gee, along with many educators who've experimented with gamified classrooms. This is something I was interested back when I was in grad school and continued being interested in when I joined industry. So what we did is we took our course, so again, a semester-long course, we broke it down into worlds, 5 worlds in this case. So a world was like a module or two, I'll say, out of the whole course, and typically covers a couple themes. So like the first one, for example, might be computational thinking and variables. So not too much stuff packed into a particular world. In each world, we had 4 key assignments, we called them. So completing these would earn a learner 25 experience points. So again, playing with the game-like elements, if they got approval from a mentor. So the learners would have to iterate on their solutions until all feedback is addressed. So it's kind of an all or nothing situation. They don't get partial marks. It's more mastery based, where you keep trying to figure out how to solve the problem and then get feedback as you go until you get it sufficiently right. And then we also had a number of additional practice assignments. So these ones were worth only 10 experience points when completed, but the criteria is just to complete them. Mentors don't give feedback on them. They're just like, okay, check, you get your points. The idea being just to encourage people to actually do the assignments so that they could build the skills that they needed to complete the bigger assignments that were so central and key. So there would be a minimum number of experience points required to move on to a new world, which requires that all 25 experience point assignments are completed. So you have to complete the 4 key assignments. And you also have to complete most of the 10 XP assignments, but usually you could skip 1 or 2 of them to still pass the world. And the guild part, finally, much like the guilds in games like World of Warcraft, we form guilds of 3 to 5 learners each, and we get an experienced subject matter expert to mentor the group as the guild lead. And so that's where we have that little sense of community, and we have that assignment of a very specific and small set of learners to each mentor. So the lead is there to support their learners, answer questions, try to build that community, give them feedback, and assign experience points by giving feedback on their assignments. We also have been experimenting a little bit with accountability models to drive up that accountability even more. And so one thing that I had defined early on was saying that each member of the guild has to earn the minimum XP before the guild can move on together to the next world. So the idea was to encourage the guild to help each other out, get this feeling of they're all in it together. We also experimented with deadlines to complete a world to ensure everyone was along. I admit in our first experiment, we got pretty loose with those deadlines because it was a first experiment. So we kind of didn't really follow that, but we envisioned in a more permanent program, you could have, for example, a rolling registration period where every 2 months, let's say, a guild could start, or current guilds could either move on to the next world together or continue in the current world. So results from that first experiment, we actually saw pretty good results. So we had 36 learners register for the course. There were a number of them that kind of disappeared right away. Either they left the company or they realized pretty quickly they weren't going to have time to do this. So some of those didn't really start the course per se, they were just registered. But we got 24 of them through World 1, which I think is phenomenal because World 1 is probably maybe a little smaller than our previous experiment with Ruby, but not by a lot. And even if you only did World 1, you still learn something about computational thinking and variables. You start getting your feet wet with programming. I've had people who've completed World 1 go off and learn Twine, for example, to make scenario-based learning experiences for their team. So they did get value out of it. And then as you go from there, we did drop off, but we had, a decent number get all the way to the end. So again, this is like side of your desk doing an entire university course over, I think it took, like I said, it was very loose with deadlines. So it took us maybe a year and a half, maybe 2, I actually don't remember now. So it did take a little while, but we did get some people through to the end, which is super cool. But I think what's cooler is that when I gathered feedback from folks, hearing about how they were able to use what they learned in their own roles. So a couple quick quotes, for example, one person said, one of the best things to come to personal development ever, working from the same playbook with a bunch of people has been fantastic. So kind of speaking to the guild model and how having that consistent group has really helped them. Another person said, has got me excited about it again, meaning programming. Love learning and chatting with others, reading the same book. It's the same kind of sentiment. And this one I really love. Dramatically, I think I finally found an inspiration for a career path. So that's really cool too. I've heard of other really great stories as well. I reached out to somebody just yesterday, and he's on a secondment as a data scientist, and was saying how much doing the course helped him get there. He came from talent acquisition as a recruiter, and he originally used the skills to be a better technical recruiter. So he kind of got a double whammy. Others have been able to use the course to get into other skills development programs within the company that help them become developers. So that was really cool as well. But if it's not repeatable, it's not very useful, is it? So I want to mention that I have a colleague, Alan Brennan. He works on technical learning for frontline support advisors, and he has adopted this model successfully as well. So he did a run through of the same course I did, CS1. He started with 51 learners, mostly from support, but this time the deadlines were strict because the course was meant as a prerequisite to that aforementioned skills development program where you might be able to get become a developer through the program. And applications for that program were coming up, and he wanted to prepare folks for it. So these learners had to finish the entire course in 8 months, part-time, on top of their regular jobs. And as you can see, we had several people get through the first couple of worlds, and we had by the end 5 people who made it all the way to the end, which is really cool. Like, I think anything more than 0 is pretty awesome in this case, especially with those strict deadlines. So this colleague of mine, Alan, he also applied the guild model to a follow-up CS2 course. He didn't use the XP in the same way, but mostly used the same model. And he's going to be applying it to other courses as well, coming up for his audience on topics like Ruby, Ruby on Rails, and React, and so on. And it's really cool to see his takeaway from it. He says, I'm pretty confident that folks wouldn't complete any of these without a guild type structure. It's also pretty easy to manage if you get guild leads involved and give them a good framework to work around, like a solid course and suggested solutions and so on. So sure, you need a well-designed course to work with and well-designed material to work with, but once you have that and you can find your mentors as your guild leads, then you know, as a program manager, it's not too much to handle. And as a final happy note, news that is hot off the press, we partnered with York University to issue official externally recognized badges for our CS1 learners. So my first cohort that finished, so the first graph you saw, they got their badges just yesterday and are already sharing them on LinkedIn, and they're very excited. And then the second cohort, Alan's cohort, who recently finished or is about to finish, they're going to be getting their badges soon as well. So we hope that badges, as these programs move forward, and we can make new badges for different skills, we hope they provide a little extra incentive for learners to get through what can be a quite challenging learning journey. So to conclude, I want to say that if you're interested in checking out the Guild handbook that I made and actually shared at the very beginning of the first experiment, which outlines in pretty good detail how it all works, I've made a PDF publicly available, so you can check that out at this link. And other than that, thank you. If you want to connect, Twitter is probably the easiest way, and there is my handle. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gail. That was really interesting. Excellent. Excellent. Are there any questions? Of course, you've given your link so people know how to reach you, which is very helpful. So in that case, I'm going to thank you, and we'll move to the second presentation, which is called Earn While You Learn, Francisation Training for Work. And the presenter is Kelly Boutillier from Concordia University. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Gail. That was an amazing presentation. It's a bit scary to follow, but I'm going to do my best. I think that's really exciting. So hi, everyone. Thank you again for sitting here and continuing to listen to my presentation. The program that I'm going to talk to you about today, it's a project that I was involved in in a former job. So the integrated learning approach was born effectively out of the collapse of the Ontario manufacturing sector in the early 2000s. Hundreds, if not thousands, of workers suddenly found themselves out of the job. And while they had several years of practical experience, they didn't have their paper credentials to help them get access to new jobs. And so basically they thought, okay, fine, I'll go back to college, I'll get my qualifications. They would approach the colleges, and the colleges would refuse them because many of them didn't have a high school diploma. So following on, these folks would go to the high schools to see, how do I get my high school diploma? And we're often told their literacy levels were too low. So suddenly these individuals were faced with needing several years of education before they would be granted access back into the workforce. Many of them had financial obligations, and so this was really not viable for them. Local employment centers started to work with the educational institutions and with employers to try to find a better way forward. And this is how this integrated learning approach was born. So this presentation, like I said, it involves a pilot project that I was involved in leading from 2017 to 2019 while working for an organization called CEDEC. For those of you who aren't familiar, CEDEC is a Quebec-based not-for-profit that supports English minority speakers, or minority English speakers, I should say, to improve their economic outcomes. So with that, here we go. So the background to this problem. All right, I'm going to ask you to pretend that we have a time machine and we're going to go back to pre-COVID times, which feels like a very, very long time ago. Back before COVID hit, the Canadian economy was doing really well. And the biggest problem that it was experiencing, especially in Quebec, especially in the tourism sector, was a workforce shortage. And so we were approached as an organization from Mont Sutton, which is a popular ski destination in Sutton, Quebec. And they were experiencing a workforce shortage. They were having a very hard time recruiting. They need approximately 350 staff to run optimally each winter season. And they were not able to find the folks that they needed. So the idea became, how about if we start to work with the existing staff who happen to be generally unilingual English speaking and help them to improve their French skills. That way we could move them in between the different positions at the ski hill. If there was, say, bilingual staff who were ill, we would be able to move them back and forth. So that was kind of where we were going with that. The English speaking employees, obviously, they were interested, but they had a challenge as well, which is that they couldn't afford to take time off to pursue French language training. So while they saw value in it, it was challenging for them to make sure or access it, I guess I should say. So the challenges to mount this kind of a project was actually a really large collective effort because of many of the challenges that existed. So the very first challenge was to figure out, okay, who can we get around the table that can make this project run forward? So we know, for example, that obviously we needed the employer in place. Mont Sutton needed to be there. We also needed to figure out who was responsible locally for teaching French language training. So, we sort of did our research and discovered that the Eastern Township School Board, they were in the area. They offered francisation, so a curriculum in French second language training. Another challenge that came up was securing funding. So each of the different partners had needs that had to be met, and it was challenging to sort of uncover those needs, but also to clearly address the needs. So for example, the Eastern Township School Board was open to the notion of adjusting their curriculum, but they needed to have a minimum number of participants in the program. That meant that Mont Sutton had to come up with a minimum number of students to participate, excuse me. Mont Sutton was also not able financially, it wasn't viable for them to pay students to learn French outside of the ski season. They were willing to contribute, but they weren't willing to cover a full salary. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the participants, they had the financial obligations that most of us have. Therefore, studying without earning an income was not viable for them. And so one of the partners that we approached then was Service Quebec, which used to be Emploi Quebec, to find out, okay, is there a funding potential here? And at the time, the existing benefit structure did not cover job seekers in this particular context. So once we got all of those things sorted out, the next issue was a paradigm shift for the French second language instructors, the FSL instructors. These instructors were used to delivering French second language training from their workbooks. They had a plan in place. They had a curriculum that they were used to following. It was very broad. It wasn't specific. We were suddenly asking them to take that language training and to highly customize it to make it appropriate for people working in the ski hill, on the ski hill in a work environment. The next challenge that we had to overcome was the learning site. So for example, it was decided that the best way to make a truly authentic learning environment was to offer the employees, the participants of the program, the possibility of learning on the ski site. I do apologize if you're hearing all of the background noise that I'm hearing. There's a large truck doing something outside my window. Okay, so the learning site, while it was a great opportunity to provide an authentic context for the learning, it also had some limitations regarding technology, such as, it didn't have computers for all of the learners. The internet access sometimes was working, sometimes was not, due to the remote nature of the location. And the last real challenge that we came up against was learners' self-perception and perseverance. For some folks, it was a huge challenge to, I guess, wrap their heads around the idea that they were going back to school. Some of these folks, they ranged in age from probably early 20s to early 60s. So it was a wide variety of folks that were participating. So let's talk about the solution. So the heart of the integrated learning project is really about finding what are the needs of the local employers, doing a task analysis, specifically asking what is it that you want employees to do. And then from there, we identify a curriculum that is appropriate and adapt it as needed. So in this case, the ski hill was looking for francisation training, French language skill training, but they also needed customer service skills. So working with the Eastern Township School Board, we identified the appropriate curriculum that we could work with and got the permissions from the ministry to make the adaptations to make it the most highly contextualized, useful training and targeted brief training that we could. We held meetings with the Eastern Township School Board. We held regular meetings with Mont Sutton to really make sure that we were putting the two items together. The next part was to bring this proposal, I guess, to the French second language teachers and ask them how they could envision implementing this. So oftentimes the instructors for languages, they have a lot of freedom. They have a lot of ability to interpret how they're going to deliver certain context, certain information content. However, in this case, we were saying, okay, we understand that what we're asking you to do is very different from how you normally operate. We need you to get creative. And they did a phenomenal job. One instructor gave us an example where they put together a scavenger hunt and had the participants going all over the ski hill, identifying objects or finding the answers to questions that required them to practice their French vocabulary, their interaction with others, and really to familiarize themselves with the workplace. And that's the last sort of point here, which is this notion of making the learning experience as authentic as possible. It was really important that these folks weren't just in a classroom somewhere learning French, disconnected from the mountain. It was very important for them to be in an environment that constantly reinforced the learning that they were undertaking. So basically, these classes took place in the 12 weeks leading up to the high season, so in the shoulder season. The goal with this first iteration was to see if we could do it. But really, what we hoped to achieve with this project was to create year-round employment for what were usually seasonal employees, excuse me. So a lot of times, part of the challenge in finding adequate staffing is the seasonal nature of the work. People, if they have an option, obviously they're going to choose year-round employment. It's more stable. You know, especially at a ski hill, they can lose time, they can lose hours and income because of weather, because of any number of things. In addition, if they, you know, they make it to the end of the ski season, well, now they have to find another job. Can they find a part-time job? Maybe, maybe not. So the goal here, this was sort of an added layer that we added on top of this project, was to then work with other local employers in the community that were seasonal, but the flip season, so in the summer season, and talk to them about how we could funnel the participants of this program into their organizations and basically respond to their employment needs and address their workplace shortage as well. So the results, the very first result, which was really exciting, was better alignment between business needs and in the employee skill sets. They weren't just getting, you know, folks who had basic French skills in sort of a broad sense. They had employees who now had specific vocabulary to address the tasks of the mountain. 11 participants completed in the phase 1, and one of them took a position at the mountain following. The phase 2 aspect of the project, 16 participants were recruited. And the most interesting consequence of this was that the employees' confidence that had increased. So not only were they feeling more comfortable about speaking in French, engaging in French, but they had more employment mobility. So they were able to access jobs previously that they couldn't in the community because their French skills were lacking. So next, what I'd like to do is I would like to show you a short documentary. This was prepared in the, I'd say, early stages of phase 1. I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment, and I am going to bring up the correct page. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Can anyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Amazing. Okay, so we tested this, but let's just make sure that everyone can hear it. So if you could just give me a shout to let me know.
Yes, we can hear it.
Amazing. Perfect. Okay, so enjoy.
Thank you.
Mont Sutton Ski Centre is one of the primary drivers of the tourism industry and the local economy of Sutton, Quebec. Like many other businesses in Canada, Mont Sutton is having difficulty finding workers, which impacts its ability to operate at full capacity.
On avait des difficultés au niveau de l'embauche. À mon arrivée ici, il y a 1 an et demi, évidemment, la pénurie de main-d'œuvre au Québec, on CLCV un peu partout.
In partnership with Mont Sutton and the Eastern Township School Board, CEDIC led an innovative public-private civil society collaboration which mobilized the collective knowledge, expertise, and resources to address labor shortages in this community.
We approached Mont Sutton, we spoke with the Eastern Township School Boards to find a way to really decrease the workforce shortage by creating a francisation program that would upskill workers to learn French while developing essential skills at the same time. And so when everybody was on board with the same vision, we had to be innovative in finding different ways moving it forward.
Et puis, en discutant ensemble, on a trouvé le modus operandi, donc d'intégrer les gens en hors saison et ensuite les faire travailler pendant la saison. Donc, on était capable d'intégrer toute notre réalité, nous, pendant qu'on est en saison moins achalandée, versus au moment où on est achalandé.
Quebec's increasingly bilingual English-speaking community has a lot to contribute to our economy. Bilingual English speakers are a great asset to the tourism sector, welcoming and serving customers and visitors at businesses such as Mont Sutton.
Phase 1 of the project ended in mid-November with 11 employees graduating from the program, better equipped and eager to take on positions at Mont Sutton during the upcoming ski season and into the summer tourism season to follow.
Je suis plus capable de travailler dans quelques emplois différents ici à la Mont Sutton. Et plus important, je suis capable maintenant de parler avec mes collègues francophones. As an Anglophone who was born and raised in Quebec, who was not bilingual and had very limited French, my options for work were quite limited.
Pour moi, cette formation, c'est comme une porte qui vient de s'ouvrir. Une fois qu'on rentre, on pourrait faire tout ce qu'on aimait faire dans la vie et faire réalité tous les projets de vie.
Ça nous bénéficie parce que dès que la saison commence, nos employés sont déjà qualifiés, formés, connaissent le jargon, connaissent bien la montagne, parce que tout le programme a été axé sur nos opérations. Donc, ils ont un avantage. Aussi, ils se connaissent entre eux. Donc, les employés sont déjà des ambassadeurs pour les nouveaux qui arrivent. Donc, on bénéficie beaucoup de cet aspect-là dans le programme.
La francisation, ça se donne déjà au niveau de la commission scolaire, c'est déjà quelque chose qui existe, mais le fait vraiment de l'adapter au niveau du travail en tant que tel, ça, c'est vraiment nouveau, c'est vraiment quelque chose d'innovateur. Donc, évidemment, on espère que le projet va pouvoir continuer parce que ça pourrait éventuellement se développer dans d'autres industries.
Donc, dans le fond, le programme, si vous voulez, un programme qui venait aider à la pénurie de main-d'œuvre au départ, puis le français était un ajout tout simplement, encore plus génial qu'on l'aurait espéré. Donc, on a donné les chances aux gens non seulement d'avoir un emploi, mais aussi d'apprendre le français en milieu de travail.
I'm not completely bilingual, but I know that I could get by in many, many different work situations, but also socially, that's a huge thing for me, to be able to feel that I can integrate more fully in Quebec society.
CEDAC's strong leadership and vision to enhance economic activity and vitality in the town of Sutton are crucial to the success of this and future initiatives.
Ce projet-là démontre vraiment que c'est une réussite. Et je veux vraiment remercier tous les partenaires par rapport à ça parce que c'est des défis quotidiens pour les communautés d'attirer du monde, un, en région, et deux, de les garder chez nous.
Equally important, having all of the right partners engaged from the public, private, and civil society sectors to inspire new thinking and innovation.
The project that I've just seen brought to life with the franchisation program at Mont Sutton, for me seemed to be an extraordinary example of basically your work in being the glue that brought together a whole bunch of partners, and which I find really exciting, and I'm just hoping that that's the type of thing that we're going to be able to do, working with the municipality and with other partners in the community.
Lorsqu'on s'allie avec des partenaires pour mettre en place des projets créatifs, innovateurs, qui rejoignent les besoins des entreprises, ça fonctionne.
Without the collaboration of the three essential partners, Mont Sutton, Eastern Township School Board, and CEDAC, this initiative would not have taken off the ground. Without the support of Service Quebec and their faith in us to carry this forward, we would still probably be debating on what to do about the workforce shortage in Sutton.
Creating jobs and strengthening employability with programs like this is a concrete example of how public, private, and civil society collaboration improves the economic well-being of communities like Sutton.
So I thought it might be sort of interesting to consider this this quote, which is coming from Sunil Joal. I'm hoping I'm saying his name correctly. And this is actually from an article that was written in 2018, but I think it's still very relevant. It says, without adequate government or employer support, there's nowhere to turn for many workers seeking to upgrade their skills and find new positions. So what I'd like to do is to ask you to consider this. Certain sectors and employees are at a greater risk of being made redundant as the economy continues to evolve. And that's not even talking about all the things that have been happening with COVID-19. So how can we work together to improve the skill alignment and to reduce barriers to individuals who are displaced due to technological disruption. So I'd love to hear, I know it's a big, heavy question, either if you feel confident to speak out loud or if you want to throw something into the chat box, I'm happy for either of those options, but I'm curious to know. And the reason I ask this is because prior to this project, there was a conference, which I believe was a CNIE conference a couple of years back. And one of the conversations that really came out of this, which got me really excited at the time, was on the mismatch between skills that are being taught in higher ed and the skills that are being sought after by employers. I'm curious to know from the folks that are here in the presentation today, what are you seeing? What are you witnessing? What do you think needs to happen to better encourage a collaboration that works for everyone? Okay, we got some chat box comment things here. Okay, so from Gail, our development degree program I mentioned was also created to bridge similar skills gap in software development. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Gail, and this is the thing we're seeing. I was really excited actually when you were talking about the badge system that you'd created. We're seeing a lot of innovation on the tech from the tech sector that is working, obviously, and it's working for Canadians. Has anyone else seen any programs or working on anything that they'd like to share? There we go. I would like to say thank you to everyone for being here today. If you would like to learn more information about the work that CDEC does, there's their communications director right here, Katarina Silva, is very happy to speak with anybody who's interested. And if you want to talk more about integrated learning or nerdy projects, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address, my LinkedIn profile. I'm on Twitter, but not enough to make it count. So I don't think it's very helpful to share.
That was great. Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we see you sent us your contact information. Okay, those were excellent presentations. So thank you both to Gail Carmichael and to Kelly Boutillier. And I encourage you to go back to the schedule for the conference and see what next to attend.